Of course, when you get bigger, you get stronger, right? Of course, gaining muscle contributes to strength. So I guess I would ask, what is their primary argument against that? I mean, I'm sure they would agree that in general, as people gain muscle, they are getting stronger. So what are they arguing against, really?
They're arguing that that relationship could be completely spurious. So the actual change in muscle size is totally independent of the change in strength gain, and that this change in strength gain could be coming from a number of other things, and those things are not themselves hypertrophy. So, for example, this idea of a 1RM being a test, and you just need to practice the test, and it's kind of like it becomes a skill rather than something that you physically adapt for on a muscle fiber size level.
Gotcha.
They have published reviews reviewing everything from steroids research to mouse research. They've also published a couple of resistance training studies, and what they find is, so for one of the studies, they had participants train heavy with one arm and lighter with the other arm, and the heavier arm did fewer reps, so it didn't increase in size as much. The lighter arm did more reps, so it increased in size more. And with that, they tried to kind of dissociate strength from hypertrophy, because you might see similar strength gains despite one arm getting a lot larger due to the higher up stimulus.
Right.
And they kind of argue just because these things, because hypertrophy itself is not the only predictor of strength, it therefore does not drive strength. So a lot of their work kind of shows that hypertrophy isn't necessary for strength gain, which I would totally agree with. Mm-hmm. A lot of their work shows that hypertrophy is not sufficient for strength gain, so you can get larger without getting stronger, and that's certainly true. But the basis of our argument is that hypertrophy is a contributory cause. So it's neither necessary nor sufficient. And this is because you have other adaptations, such as neural adaptations. So for example, I can get larger, but I may get less skilled at the movement itself.
Right. Okay.
So if that, then you have two variables that are changing that are kind of, they're both difficult to measure. And if you can't tease them apart, you're not going to find anything. Right. So that's kind of the basis of our argument. And in addition, there's kind of a mechanical basis in that you have these sarcomeres that add in parallel as you gain muscle. And there's a basic tenet in mechanics which states that muscles in parallel add. So if you have more sarcomeres in parallel, those forces should add. So more force should mean greater strength. So I look at this as a very mechanical problem.
There we were just talking a little bit about the relationship between, or potential relationship between, hypertrophy and strength. Could you go into maybe some other factors? You mentioned that you can certainly get stronger without getting bigger. So how does one do that?
Yeah, so there are several adaptations that occur when you resistance train. Those range from everything from the periphery to the spinal cord, and even the brain, if you consider strength or these movements kind of as a skill. So in the muscle itself, you're going to have adaptations ranging from changes in the myofibrillar protein content of the muscle. You'll also have changes in the connective tissue and the extracellular matrix. So when these muscle fibers pull, that force has to be transmitted to the tendon somehow. And that's through this extracellular matrix. And this extracellular matrix connects all of these muscle fibers to one another and to the aponeurosis. So if you get a stiffer and more connected extracellular matrix, that in theory could increase the strength of your muscle. And the way that works is, I think Chris Beardsley has written about this in the past, but the idea is that if you have force that's transmitted laterally to this connective tissue, then that connective tissue can then handle the force. So the rest of the fiber doesn't necessarily have to transmit that force. Then moving up a level, you have the entire muscle, it crosses a joint. So when you change the muscle size, that's going to affect the moment arm of the muscle about that joint. And that's going to happen in a position-dependent manner and a muscle-dependent manner. We published a modeling study on this as kind of a proof of concept in the biceps brachii and brachialis. I think that was published in 2015 in Pure J. And what we showed is essentially as the muscle gets larger, the moment arms of these elbow flexors, at least when you're in full elbow extension, also get larger. And that's a nonlinear relationship. With resistance training, you also have a change in the architecture of the muscle. So if you have an increase in pennation angle, you may be able to pack more fibers in parallel for a given muscle volume.